Thanksgiving used to mean warmth, laughter, and my father carving the turkey at the head of the table. This year, the chair at the head was empty. My father had been gone 3 months, and in his place sat Lorraine, my stepmother, in her tailored silk dress and diamond smile. Halfway through dinner, she tapped her wine glass and rose with theatrical poise. "I have an announcement," she said, eyes sweeping over the table. "We're selling the family business. None of you will inherit a dime." My step-siblings, Evan and Chloe, exchanged a quick grin, already imagining the payday. I just leaned back in my chair and asked, "Who's the buyer?" Lorraine's chin lifted. "Everest Holdings. They're paying $50 million. I laughed not out of humor but satisfaction. "I am Everest Holdings." The room froze. Forks hovered in midair, and for the first time all evening, no one had a single word to say. Silence has a weight to it, a dense, suffocating thing that settles over a room and dares anyone to break it. Evan stared at me as if I'd just spoken in another language. Chloe's perfectly glossed lips parted in shock. Lorraine's hand tightened on the stem of her wine glass, the diamonds on her fingers catching the chandelier light. She didn't speak, and I didn't offer an explanation. Not yet. Let them stew. Because my story didn't start at this table. It started decades ago, in a cramped workshop behind my father's first house. My father, Richard Dawson, was not a man you could easily forget. Tall, broad-shouldered, with hands that looked more like they belonged to a craftsman than a CEO, he built Dawson Medical Systems from nothing. He invented and manufactured specialized surgical tools, equipment so precise, top hospitals worldwide became dependent on them. Growing up, I spent more afternoons than I could count in that workshop, wearing safety goggles too big for my face, handing him tools while he explained the difference between a scalpel handle made for precision versus one made for speed. He didn't just teach me the business, he taught me to think like an engineer, to solve problems without waiting for someone else to hand me the answer. By the time I was 15, I could assemble half the company's product line from memory. Things changed the year I turned 25. Dad remarried. Lorraine came into our lives like a soft hurricane, all charm, expensive perfume, and a smile that hinted she knew things you didn't. She wasn't cruel in obvious ways. She was too smart for that, but she understood power and how to collect it. Her children, Evan and Chloe, were in their late 20s, and within months, both had corner offices at Dawson Medical Systems. I didn't get an office. When I suggested joining the operations team, Lorraine tilted her head, smiling as though I'd just made a naive joke. "Oh, sweetheart, you've got a good heart, but this is real corporate work. You wouldn't want to get in over your head." Evan was given control of procurement despite having no supply chain experience. Chloe became head of marketing, a title she wore like a crown while outsourcing nearly everything to agencies that bled the company budget dry. Dad, he tried to keep the peace. I think he believed Lorraine when she said I'd be happier finding my own thing. He didn't see the way she slowly rearranged the board of directors, bringing in her friends and sidelining his loyal allies. The final blow came last year, when I presented a plan to modernize our manufacturing line, a plan that would have cut costs by 18% and positioned us ahead of competitors. Evan dismissed it as too risky, Chloe called it boring, and Lorraine told me in front of the board that I had a student's enthusiasm, but not a leader's experience. I walked out of that meeting, packed my things, and didn't look back. 3 months ago, Dad died suddenly. A stroke. I barely had time to process the loss before Lorraine swept in, wearing black couture and a fresh coat of control. She now held 51% of the voting shares, enough to dictate the company's future without asking anyone's permission. They thought they'd cut me out for good. They were wrong. Lorraine didn't waste time making it official. 2 weeks after Dad's funeral, I got an email from the board secretary, not even from her, directly informing me that my advisory role at Dawson Medical Systems had been eliminated in light of current restructuring needs. No signature. No thank you for your years of involvement. Just a paragraph and a legal attachment. I stared at that email for a long time, feeling the familiar burn in my chest. It wasn't shock by then. I knew better than to expect fairness, but the finality of it still hurt. When I called Lorraine for an explanation, she answered on the second ring, her voice dripping with that faux warmth she saved for special occasions. "Oh, Natalia, This was purely a business decision. We're streamlining. Besides, you've always had that independent streak. I'm sure you'll land on your feet. Land on my feet. Right. That night, I sat in my apartment surrounded by boxes of my father's old blueprints and notes he'd left me over the years. If Lorraine thought she'd shut me out for good, she'd underestimated just how much I'd learned from him, not just about scalpels and surgical clamps, but about business. About seeing an opportunity before anyone else did. I sold the small condo Dad had helped me buy after college. It wasn't much, but between that and my savings, I scraped together just over 80. Zero. Not enough to buy a company, but enough to start one. I knew two things for certain. Dawson Medical Systems was slow to adapt. If I wanted to win, I couldn't fight them head-on, not yet. I incorporated under the name Everest Holdings, a name meant to sound unshakable, unreachable. But publicly, Everest was fronted by N. Weston, Natalia West, an identity I created to keep my connection to the Dawsons invisible. In the beginning, Everest was just me, my laptop and a cramped desk in a co-working space that smelled like burnt coffee and ambition. I took small contracts, helping mid-sized manufacturers fix supply chain bottlenecks. I lived lean, no vacations, no new clothes, dinners made of instant noodles and discount wine. But every contract led to another. Word got around that Everest could do what bigger firms couldn't: solve problems fast. Within 2 years, I had a 5-person team. By year 5, I developed a proprietary integration platform software that could link outdated manufacturing systems with modern automation tools. It was exactly the kind of upgrade Dawson Medical desperately needed, and exactly the kind they would never accept from me. That was fine. I wasn't ready to offer it, not yet. Because while Lorraine and her children were busy congratulating themselves on their vision, I was building the foundation for something much bigger. Something they wouldn't see coming until it was already theirs no more. Growth came in waves. The first big break happened in year 3, when a Midwestern hospital group hired Everest Holdings to overhaul its surgical equipment supply chain. Their old system was bleeding money on delays and mismatched inventory. We cut their costs by 22% in 6 months. They paid our invoice in full and gave us 3 glowing referrals. From there, the phone never stopped ringing. I hired strategically people who could wear 3 hats at once, who didn't flinch at 70-hour weeks, who thrived on solving impossible problems. By year 5, Everest Holdings wasn't just a consultancy anymore. We were a hybrid operations, software integration, and strategic acquisitions. Our secret weapon was the platform I'd built in my apartment at 2 in the morning, a modular software solution that could take a factory's clunky, decades-old systems and make them talk to the latest automation technology. No one else had it. We licensed it quietly, choosing clients who would never tip off the Dawsons to our existence. I became meticulous about my invisibility. All contracts went through my COO, Marcus Grant, a brilliant tactician who enjoyed playing the public face. He attended conferences, signed deals, took the photo ops. Meanwhile, N. Weston stayed behind the curtain, known only to a handful of insiders who valued discretion. By year 8, Everest was valued at over $200 million. I owned 68% of it outright. That's when I started looking homeward. Dawson Medical Systems wasn't the fortress it used to be. Dad's passing had left a vacuum, and Lorraine's flashy management style had turned the company into a cash-draining parade of bad ideas. Evan signed bloated vendor contracts with his friends. Chloe spent marketing budgets on influencer junkets that brought zero ROI. Worse and better for me, their manufacturing process hadn't changed in 15 years. Competitors were eating into their market share. I spent months mapping their vulnerabilities. My team acquired controlling stakes in 2 of their key suppliers quietly through shell corporations. We also bought into 3 of their largest clients, creating leverage on both sides of the supply chain. 6 months ago, I made my first move. An anonymous acquisition proposal sent through a third-party investment firm. It was generous, $42 million, with terms that would keep the Dawson name on the building and everyone employed. Lorraine rejected it in less than 24 hours. "Too much risk," she reportedly told the board. "We can turn this around ourselves." They didn't. 2 quarters later, Dawson Medical posted its worst numbers in a decade. That's when I raised the offer to $50 million. This time, she bit. I watched from my San Francisco office as the negotiations unfolded, reading every update from my legal team while Lorraine believed she was dealing with some distant corporate investor. By the week of Thanksgiving, the contracts were signed, the transfer of ownership scheduled. Only one step remained, telling them who'd just bought their kingdom, and I intended to do it face to face. The Monday before Thanksgiving, I stood in my San Francisco office overlooking the bay, the final contracts spread across my desk. My attorney had just confirmed. Every signature was in place. The sale would be public in a matter of days. Marcus leaned in the doorway. "You sure you want to do this in person? We could just send the press release and let them choke on it." I shook my head. "No. I want to see their faces when they realize." We'd booked the Gulfstream for Tuesday morning, a rare indulgence. Normally, I preferred commercial flights, even in first class. But this wasn't about efficiency. This was about making an entrance. I packed deliberately. A charcoal Armani suit, a deep emerald silk blouse for dinner, Louboutin heels, and my father's old watch, the only thing of his Lorraine hadn't managed to get her hands on. The flight east felt both endless and too short. I reviewed the acquisition documents for the 100th time, noting the moment where my name would replace hers on every line of authority. By the time we landed at the small private airfield outside Boston, I'd gone over the deal so many times it felt less like a transaction, and more like the closing chapter of a novel I'd been writing for a decade. A black Bentley idled at the edge of the tarmac. The driver arranged through my Boston office, took my bag, and opened the door with a polite, "Ms. West." I smiled faintly at the alias. Soon, I wouldn't need it anymore. The Dawson estate appeared the same as it had the last time I'd seen it. Sprawling lawns edged in November frost, the white columns rising against a slate-gray sky. But without Dad, it felt hollow. Lorraine answered the door herself, swathed in cashmere and pearls. Her eyes flicked over my attire, the handbag, the understated jewelry. "Natalia," she said, as if testing the name for bitterness. "You look, well." "I am," I replied simply. Inside, Evan lounged in the living room, a tumbler of scotch in hand, while Chloe posed in front of the fireplace for what I assumed was an Instagram story. Neither of them looked up until Lorraine announced, "Natalia's here." Evan smirked. "Didn't think you'd bother this year. I wouldn't miss it," I said, letting the words hang. Dinner was set for the next evening. Lorraine dropped hints all afternoon about a big announcement she'd make over dessert, and Evan and Chloe whispered like children waiting for Christmas morning. I sipped my wine and let them have their fun. Because tomorrow night, the game would end and they'd find out who had been holding the winning hand all along. Thanksgiving morning dawned cold and brittle, the kind of New England chill that made every breath feel sharper. From my bedroom window, I could see frost glistening on the manicured lawns and the skeletal branches of the oaks lining the drive. Somewhere downstairs, the scent of roasting turkey drifted through the air, mingled with the faint hum of voices. Lorraine ran the holiday like a stage production. By noon, the dining room looked like something out of a glossy magazine, a long mahogany table set with heirloom china, crystal goblets, and a centerpiece of gold-dusted pumpkins and white roses. I lingered upstairs, watching the clock, timing my entrance. I wanted them to feel my presence before they knew why. When I finally came down, Evan was already half a glass deep into something expensive, regaling Chloe with a story about a major deal he'd landed. I knew the truth: one of our shell companies had thrown him that contract to keep Dawson Medical solvent long enough for the acquisition. Chloe, in a velvet dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent, was busy filming a holiday vlog for her followers. She didn't even pause her recording when she gave me an air kiss. "Nat, you're looking upgraded. Work's been good," I said simply. Lorraine flitted between the kitchen and the dining room, supervising the staff with the efficiency of a general commanding troops. Every so often she would glance at me, that polished smile never slipping, but her eyes sharp, calculating, measured every movement I made. By the time everyone took their seats, the room hummed with the clink of cutlery and the low murmur of small talk. I noticed Lorraine had placed me at the far end of the table, directly opposite her at the head. It was a classic power move. Physical distance meant conversational distance. I let her have it. For now. Dinner unfolded in courses, each one described by Lorraine as though she'd personally cooked it. Evan bragged about his leadership at the company. Chloe recounted a recent brand collaboration. I smiled, nodded, and kept my glass of wine half full, the appearance of participation, without giving them anything to work with. But under the polished conversation, tension coiled tighter. I could feel it building with each passing minute. Each sidelong glance Lorraine cast toward the empty space at her side, where a manila folder sat discreetly. Dessert was the cue. Lorraine's diamond bracelet caught the candlelight as she tapped her spoon against her goblet. The chatter died instantly. She had trained them well. "I have an announcement," she began, her voice warm, confident. "One that will ensure the future of this family." Evan leaned forward eagerly. Chloe clasped her hands in anticipation. I folded mine in my lap, ready. The first domino was about to fall. Lorraine's smile widened, the kind of smile reserved for charity galas and magazine covers. "As you all know, your father built Dawson Medical Systems from the ground up," she began, her tone smooth, practiced. "After his passing, I've done my best to maintain his legacy. But the market is changing and it's time for a strategic move." She paused for dramatic effect, letting her gaze sweep the length of the table before landing squarely on me. "We're selling the company." The words dropped like a stone into still water. Evan blinked, then broke into a slow grin. Chloe gasped softly, then clapped her hands together. "But there's more," Lorraine continued, her voice almost lilting now. "The proceeds from the sale will not be divided as inheritance. They will be reinvested elsewhere, and for the good of the family, I will decide how." Evan chuckled under his breath, clearly assuming the good of the family meant himself. Chloe's smile stretched wider. I set my fork down deliberately. "Who's the buyer?" Lorraine straightened, clearly savoring the question. "Everest Holdings. They've agreed to pay $50 million. It's an incredible deal, especially given the company's recent challenges." My lips curved into something that might have been a smile, but not the kind that reached my eyes. "50 million? Yes," she said, mistaking my tone for admiration. I let the silence stretch for 3 heartbeats. "I am Everest Holdings." The reaction was instantaneous. Chloe's hands froze mid-clap. Evan's chair scraped against the floor as he half rose, then sat again. Lorraine's smile faltered, but only for a fraction of a second before she composed herself. "That's ridiculous," she said lightly, though her voice had an edge. "Everest Holdings is run by a N. Weston, I believe." "A man, Natalia Weston?" I corrected. "My professional name." Her eyes narrowed. "You've been playing games." I leaned forward slightly, my voice calm but carrying across the table. "No. I've been running a company. For the last 10 years. A company that now owns Dawson Medical Systems." Evan laughed sharp, disbelieving. "So you're telling us this whole time, while we were running things, you were, what, plotting?" "Working," I said simply. "Buying stakes in your suppliers, your clients, watching you run Dad's company into the ground. And when the time was right, making you the best offer you were ever going to get." Chloe's voice was barely above a whisper. "You set this up?" "Yes," I said. "Every step. And you agreed to it. The contracts are signed. The deal is closed. Legally, this company has been mine since Tuesday." Lorraine's knuckles whitened around her wine glass. "You blindsided me." I let out a short laugh. "You cut me out. After Dad died, you stripped me of my role, erased my influence, and thought that was the end. You underestimated me." Evan's face flushed red. "This is theft. You stole our—" I cut him off. "I purchased a failing business at a generous price. And since you seem concerned about theft, Evan, perhaps you'd like to explain the phantom vendor accounts and the 180 funneled into your Cayman account over the past 18 months? The color drained from his face. You can't prove." "I have the transaction logs, the vendor registrations, the IP addresses, all tied to your office computer. You'll be given the option to resign quietly. I suggest you take it." Chloe shifted uncomfortably. "This is insane. You can't just take over." "That's exactly what I've done," I said, turning to her. And maybe you'd like to explain why you signed a 400 marketing contract with a company owned by your best friend's boyfriend, the one that produced exactly 0 measurable results? Her mouth opened, then shut again. Lorraine set her glass down, her voice low but sharp. What do you want from us, Natalia? Is this revenge? Because if it is, congratulations, you've humiliated us. No, I said, my voice steady. This isn't revenge. This is restoration. Dad built something remarkable, and you've been dismantling it piece by piece. I'm here to put it back together properly. Her chin lifted defiantly. You'll regret this. I met her gaze without blinking. I regret nothing. The room went silent again, but it was a different kind of silence, now brittle, dangerous. Evan stared at the tablecloth as though it might offer him an escape route. Chloe fiddled with her phone, though, for once, she didn't dare record. I stood slowly, letting my chair scrape against the floor. Enjoy dessert. Tomorrow morning, the press release goes out. The world will know who owns Dawson Medical Systems. And starting Monday, the changes begin. Without another word, I left the dining room, my heels clicking against the marble floor, the sound echoing down the hall like a gavel striking wood. Behind me, no one moved. 3 months later, Dawson Medical Systems no longer existed, at least, not by that name. The new sign outside the headquarters read, Everest Dawson Technologies. The building's marble lobby displayed a sleek timeline of the company's evolution. My father's first prototype, the patents he filed, the expansions he led, and now, the merger that would carry his work into the future. Lorraine still held her shares, but her role was strictly honorary chairwoman emeritus, with no voting power, no executive authority. She accepted the title with a brittle smile, knowing it was the only concession she would get. Evan resigned quietly, signing a non-disclosure agreement in exchange for avoiding criminal charges. Last I heard, he was consulting in Florida. Chloe left the company entirely, rebranding herself as a business influencer and trying to spin her exit as a mutual decision. For me, the work was just beginning. We overhauled manufacturing with the very integration platform they once dismissed as too risky. We cut waste, expanded into new markets, and secured contracts my father had once dreamed about. Within the first quarter, profits rose 28%. But the real victory wasn't in the numbers. It was walking through the production floor and seeing the machines humming, the staff confident about the future. It was hearing my father's name spoken with respect again, not as a footnote in a failing enterprise, but as the foundation of something thriving. One evening, as I was leaving the office, I paused by the timeline in the lobby. My father's portrait hung beside mine, now 2 leaders, 2 eras. I thought about that Thanksgiving night, the shock on their faces when I'd said, I am Everest Holdings. Yes, it had felt good, but this steady, undeniable rebuilding felt better. Revenge might have been the spark. Restoration was the fire.